they stopped the payments of it, but the state has never taken out the legislation about the donor towns, and that's why we agreed to join Portsmouth and other towns to a lobbyist to fight that. But that's why that's there. But that money goes, if the town collects it, goes to the school district, and then they divvy it out. 30% of it goes to the town, and then the districts are done separately. Those are our 3 districts, and based on their budgets, do that. So if you notice that the tax rate, was 1022 this year, and it was 1022 last year. Was that magic? Nope. The select board said, we want to keep the tax rate down. How much do we have to take from our surplus to have the same tax rate? So that's where the almost $1 million from surplus went. There was, 3 million at the time in it. They took about $1 million out. They took $1 million out of it to apply to the to reduce our taxes. Now, when I first started doing this a decade ago, we were actually building up that fund. We were always putting money into that fund, and then the select boards to try to help keep the taxes down because spending was going up. Started doing it. So I think the biggest one I've ever seen is 800. It was 500 last year, but I think this is the biggest, the most we've ever applied from the surplus to help keep the tax rate down. Okay. So no one really looks at RI total except for me, and then the budget committee theoretically works with everyone. But RI is this in 2021, $31 million. Going towards government services. So, where does it all come from? The town operating budget's up, almost 2 million. School budget 14, up about, less than 2%. We'll talk about the Rye Water Department, but that's up to 1.7, 15%. You add all that up, you add the warrant articles, you add in the districts, the 2 million to the county. That's where we get the over $31 million. So you can argue, well, some of it goes to, to reserve funds, but yeah, so it's either spent or going into buckets, 31 million. And this is actually low because it doesn't include some of the usage fees we pay Rye Water, Aquarian, and the sewer. So as far as government types of services, it's over $3.5 million for Rye. So don't think we only got $10 million in budget and 14 in school. But you got to think 31 million. And the problem is no one has this view. The select board only control the town, the school board the Rye Water District's a separate district. And no one's really over all of it except for you, the voter, because it's all your money. Okay. So if you're asking yourself, well, what do I pay? Well, this is a little table that helps you figure that out. So if your house is, you're fortunate enough to have a house worth $1 million, this is what you're paying for each of those buckets of services. So the schools, you paid over $5,000. We'll show later that the Portsmouth High School, we pay theirs about 20%, so that's about $580. Well, double that's about $1,200 that you think if you can write a check to the high school. The administration cost is about 40%. So that's about $2,400 you're spending a year just for administration for the education of the kids in Rye. If your house is worth $750, think of your library card is costing you $227. If your house is only worth, $500,000, you paid $400. You're going to pay $400 to have the dump, have roads plowed, maintained, and all the other things that DPW does. So that just gives you a sense, per household, not individual, per household, what you pay for those different services. Okay, and it doesn't include the warrant articles, which would drive that even more. All right, so this is a view of the town budget. I like this pie chart. It just gives you a sense of proportion. So if you look at the big four, if they went all the way around 3/4 of the way, that would obviously be 75%. So those big four actually add up to just around 70% of the budget that the town, so that the select board controls, is made up of those four big budgets. The library is independent, but they're about 7%, and then the other group. So the library is a little bit tricky. So, how do we figure that out? Well, we didn't get it from the town. When you go to the deliberative meeting, this is what the town gives out. A couple of years, they've actually made some charts and graphs the last couple of years, which has been an improvement. but you can't really tell what's going on. If you look at this and you squint, you'll see that, oh, DPW went up 400,000. So somebody may ask, explain why that went up 400,000. That's actually not that good of a question. I'll show you about it a little later. But it's hard to figure out. You could never do that pie chart from what the town gives you. And we do that. And what we do is, you see down below, we group some of the general government. So that's what we call the general government service. That's what's in it. So really the things that in town hall, there are some other things outside of it we call other services. And this gives you some insight into, how much it is. You can add up the percent of the operating budgets. You'll see that it's about 70%. You can see the year over change, the percentage change year over year. That's why somebody will, the 26% for the DPW will jump out, and somebody wants to ask questions about that because it went up, where the other ones only went up, a lot less than that. But that gives you a sense of what the numbers are, what jumps, and actually they may not even do it because they'll have to go look at a line item. They won't have that bigger view of the deliberative meeting. So to look at what some of those things are that drove up the town budget, it increased by, almost 2 million. And I was like, wait a minute, 2 million? Yeah, go back in the numbers, almost 9 million up to it. That's 1.9 million. That's how much it went up. And this looks at, the DPW that I was just talking about, the revolving fund, the RIREC, and they take in money for all their programs and it goes out. So you don't have to be concerned about that because it's offset. And then the rest, the fire, the general, sewers there, the police, library. And then we also looked at, what are those increases over 20,000? So the DPW is made up of operations and personnel. You can see those two lines. The other one too that jumped out at me was the solid waste disposal going up and solid waste collection, recycle. Okay, you want that one to go down? Recycle more. So that's where we can help there. All right, boom. I like this chart better because it gives you a better sense of what's happening with the town operating, that's just going up. You can see the blue going left to right, the total government, how that continues to go up. Now the red is the DPW. Remember it went up by 400,000, but look what happened in 2020. It dipped, all right? But then it went back up. So in reality, that 400,000 gain really was probably more realistic, like a 200,000 gain in line with everything else. It's such a big change because it dropped last year, but it's still going up at the same rate. So you can see the big four all going up at a pretty consistent rate. Library staying pretty flat. The dark blue I'll talk about a little bit is the debt, but it's at the tail end of the debt going down. Those numbers there. So, if we look over a decade, what's been happening with the big four, they've all gone up about $600,000 each, about 2.5 million over the last decade. And they're all going up at a pretty good clip. You can see the red, the DPW, that little zigzag down and then went back up. But those four, just like the other chart, over a decade, continue to go up and up and up. All right. The other things, the libraries, others stay pretty much flat and aren't going up any of that rate. So none of those other lines, have quite of that slope of the big four. All right. And let's look a little at the debt. So the debt's dropped by over $1 million. So when we did the public safety building, the first conservation loans, it really piled up our debt, and it didn't really impact the town that much because at the same time we packed on all that debt, donor towns went away. So we weren't kicking in all that money into the state for other schools, and it was replaced by big debt payments. So those big debt payments going down over the last decade have masked some of those increases in the big four, getting more expensive. So, the select board, always, would say, we're keeping taxes low, we're doing, government was going up, they were spending more, the tax rate was being kept down by the debt dropping, more money, and I'll show you, being shifted to warrant articles, but that drives the tax rate up. And then, with the debt going down. So this is, and actually they use the surplus to pay down to do it. So those are the drivers there. Those warrant articles, that trend is up. It's over about 2 million total warrant articles. Here's that list. I just pulled from the other table. Some of the money isn't going out the door. It's going to those buckets that we're holding for another day. But these are all things that aren't in the budget. So when you're looking at the budgets, they also have all these other line items. So we are actually spending more for those areas, but they're not in the budget because they're in these warrant articles. They go to buckets. They don't hit the operating budget. So, those budget numbers are actually higher than they're shown. So with that, that trend of the warrant articles is going up. So more and more of the spend for the down is shifting towards warrant articles. So it does hit the tax rate, but it's masking some of the growth in the actual budgets. And I added that trend line so you could get a feel for what's going on there. Another one, I wanted to call this one out, and this is, how much we spend in water. It wasn't this big when I started looking at this a while ago. Got to call out the Rye Water District, by the way. First time I went to a meeting, it was Joe Cummings and I, just two of us. They've done a great job with signs, everything else. There could have been 15 or 20 people there, so that's an improvement. But 2/3 of Rye is on Rye Water. The third that's not is on Aquarian. But if you take the Rye Water District budget, you add in their warrants, you add the sewer, that's just water going the other direction. It's not clean. It's over $2 million in water. So we really have a big five because it's bigger than the town government, DPW, fire, or police. So, but there is no, look at it, because sewer is separate, Rye Water, Aquarian, and it doesn't include the usage fees. So, I don't know how to do it, but it's your money. There should be a bigger focus on water and how much we're spending, because we spend more on water than anything else. All right, let's jump to the school. The school budgets, the select board the school board doesn't have much ability to change things year to year. The high school tuition, special programs, they're pretty much locked in out of their control. They can change things, the teacher salary and what happens in minimum, but those have got to be structural changes. They're not going to make a difference. So the expense, the only way to influence those budgets are really to look at what's happening with teacher salary, benefits, and the administrative. So, and how we get at those, these are the things we put in the bucket. Once again, you can't get that out of what the school board gives you. We've got to go through and put all that information, put things in buckets so that you can get this kind of view. And then how it's going up, you can see some of the numbers, how it splits up. We'll show you the percentages on another graph in a second. But the net effect is it's went up 1.6%, and that's what's relevant for the schools. What drove that was, they had to add staff and more COVID things. They've actually added permanent substitutes for next year to try to give them more flexibility, and then being fire drills, finding teachers when teachers are out. They've added a technology integrator person for Rye to work between the two schools. The SAU is, the administrator keeps on going up and up. They've added a role for financial management and somebody to take care of facilities through the district, which is Greenland, us, Newmarket, and Newington. And then retirement and healthcare insurance also. Those are the big things that drove most of the increase for the school. Here's where you can see, that the administrative costs roll about around 40%. The high school stays pretty flat. What we pay at, about 20% of the budget. Teachers' salaries have always been, relatively around a quarter of the budget. There, and so that's the way that, stayed. But what's the administration is what's going up, and you can see that going up by 4.5%. For the last 4 or 5 years, salaries are going up. Notice that, once again, we mentioned earlier, the high school tuition staying relatively flat, over the years, but the administration expense is really that's driving the percentage growth in the school budget. And so the question is, is that getting better education by having more administrative expenses or not? Now, a big question is really what's happening with the Rye school population. So the yellow line is the total population. And, it's dropped by, over 175. But if you look at, like I said, the Portsmouth high school tuition, the gray line is relatively flat. you know, the drop has come at the elementary school and the junior high. The junior high was going down real fast, and